Hey, Lee Robinson here at American Sentinel Canine. We just got done riding her bike. What were you waiting on me for today?
Riding my bike.
What was I doing all day?
Working.
With what?
Dogs.
Dogs. That's what we do around here. Lee Robinson from American Sentinel Canine. So this video is going to be about maintaining professionalism. You know, as we witness various things in the canine community, you know, a lot of stuff can be very positive, but sometimes that negative individual or negative observation or experience stands out. Go ahead and get off. Stands out and becomes a distraction from what's really important. And I'm going to tell you, the pursuit of perfection is what we need to keep our eye on. If we pursue perfection but fail to obtain it, we should still obtain excellence. And this is something that needs to be about our life, about our family, about our work, because as stewards of our Creator, we're supposed to represent Him in all that we do. Now, I understand some people don't believe in a Creator, but even if you don't, man, don't waste your time losing focus on what's important. And when it comes to a breeding program, the goal is consistent perfection, which may indeed be unobtainable, but, well, it is unobtainable to consistently produce perfection. Nobody does that. Culling is always going to be part of the game. And culling is a negative thing that nobody wants to deal with. It's expensive. It's no fun. It's just not something that we want. But when we breed dogs are not cookie cut products that are manufactured in zero tolerance of error. All right, there's going to be some deviation from the norm. It's called a bell-shaped population distribution. Please look that up if you don't know what that is. Bell-shaped population distribution. And this is especially true for breeding dogs, because most of the traits that we pursue are what's called polygenic, which means they are things that are controlled by multiple genes. A very common thing that we've seen over the last few years is a discussion of what's known as epigenetics. Now, personally, I don't really worry about epigenetics too much, because in epigenetics, there's two factors. How the environment impacts the expression of the genes, but it doesn't actually change the genes. It just changes the expression of the genes. So we're still back to nature nurture. In other words, nature, the genetics, nurture the development of the trait. So it can be simplified. Instead of over focusing on the term epigenetics and all of its details, just focus on genetics and developing a dog to its full potential, which is nurturing the individual. Now, some people seem to think that there's multiple breeding strategies, but truth is there's going to be 4 steps of natural selection. There's overproduction of offspring. Variation exists in the population. Then you have that performance selection, where those who are the most fit for the environment survive and then reproduce. So you have overproduction, variation, competition, and reproduction. Those are the 4 steps. And that's the way it's always going to be. Now, overproduction just means you have more than you actually need, okay? And because of that, that gives you the allowance of culling off the individuals that you don't need. Now, who are you going to cull? Are you going to cull the perfect individuals? No. If you're a good breeder, you're going to want to hold on to those perfect individuals, or really once-in-a-lifetime quality type of animals, or maybe foster them out to your friends and whatnot. Or partners that you can trust, or maybe even sell a couple to a client that shows that he is committed to appreciating the value of such an animal. All right, I'm not going to sell my apex animals for bottom dollar. Just not going to do it. I'd give them away to a friend before I sell them for bottom dollar. You know, it takes too much work to produce those extremely outstanding individuals. Now, somebody might say, well, it sounds like you have them very rare. Well, we have a lot of great great dogs. We really do. But perfection is our goal, and perfection doesn't exist. You'll never obtain perfection, because no matter how good an individual is, you can always make it stronger, faster, better endurance. You can always stretch it out more than whatever it is. If it's jumping 9 feet, we want to make it jump 10. If it's jumping 10, we're going to make it jump 11. If it's jumping 11, we're going to make it jump 12, and just continually pushing that envelope to reach a higher and higher and higher level. So in the pursuit of perfection, we will obtain excellence. And anybody that says I have 100% success is either a liar or somebody with very low standards. And yeah, it's very easy to be pleased with everything you produce if your standards are extremely low. And it's very easy to say every dog is a brood quality dog when the only thing that they have to do is come into heat. All right, so you raise that standard to a level of excellence that identifies those really apex individuals, and that's what you build your population on. You do this every generation, and you kind of like have a founder effect constantly. You produce those offspring, raise them up, you cull, that's the foundation for the next one. And slowly, by doing over time, this culling process and selection, performance-based selection over time, you eventually drive what's known as genetic drift. And genetic drift is the slow evolution of a population's gene pool towards a higher level of performance. And after time, if you have an isolated gene pool, you might end up with a great deal of homozygosity, which means the population is becoming very consistent. And that can be good or it can be bad. It depends on if you have diseases in the population and whatnot. And if you do have genetic diseases, that's going to be something that you have to deal with. However, if there are no genetic diseases in your population, let's say God made Adam and Eve and they were born originally with perfect DNA, then inbreeding is not really an issue, because you don't have any genetic disease that's going to show up when the population becomes or expresses a high degree of homozygosity, because there are no genetic defects that are going to be expressed from that homozygosity. Of course, disease and sin, and if you believe that sin impacts our disease, which personally I believe it does, but if you disagree, that's your prerogative. But regardless, disease enters the gene pool, whether it be through ultraviolet light or consuming some sort of toxin, whatever it is, these things come into our environment and our genes don't copy themselves correctly. And when that happens, you get a mutation that can result in a genetic deficiency or genetic defect. And most of the time, like 99, actually, it's extremely rare that a genetic defect is not corrected. All right, most of the time we have these little like editors in our genes that look for mistakes in our genome when a copying of one cell is being replicated to produce another cell. It looks for mutations, and when it finds a mutation, a lot of times, almost always, they're corrected, but once in a million slip by, and slowly you start to get genetic disease into the gene pool. And then if that individual has offspring, then sometimes if those genetic defects are in the gametes, which means the sperm for the male or the egg for the female, then those genetic defects can be passed on to the next generation. And then that's normally not an issue if you're outcrossing to an unrelated individual. But if you're inbreeding or line breeding, then that mutation might show back up and partner up with someone else that has the same mutation, because they have that same common infected ancestor. And so now you have a homozygosity of a genetic defect. And so that's when the genetic defect becomes expressed. And it can be carried on for generation after generation after generation and be hidden if it's a simple recessive trait, because it's a recessive trait can easily be masked, which means covered up by a dominant trait. So let's say my hat is the dominant and my face is the recessive. Well, the dominant gene can mask or dominate or block, hide the recessive allele. But when that recessive allele shows back up, that's why it's called a mask. If you look into genetics, they'll say the dominant gene masks the recessive gene. It hides that recessive gene unless that recessive gene partners up with the same recessive gene. Then there's no dominant to block it, because you have two parents. One gene comes from your mother and one gene comes from your father for every location in your genome, and the location is called a loci. So the genome is the entire genetic code of an organism, And the loci is the location of that genetic trait. And if you have that same genetic defect show up at the same location and it's recessive, it will be expressed. And that's when you'll see that genetic disease. Then it's called a homozygous recessive disease. However, like I said earlier in the video, most genetic traits in dogs that we're seeking are polygenic, which means they don't have a single loci. They have poly, which means multiple, like a polygon has multiple sides. A polygenic trait is a trait that, typically speaking, has a great deal of genetic variation because there's so many things that impact its expression, like body weight. Body weight is going to be impacted by your height, your basic genetic length of your bones. Then you also have genes that affect your growth hormone, which is going to affect also your height. When you also have genes for not only your growth hormone level, but how long do you sustain a high or elevated growth hormone level. Some people start growth hormone at really extreme levels in their teens. Some people start them earlier, some people start them later. Some people have a very short window of high levels of growth hormone. Some people have a very long window of high levels of growth hormone and then resort back to a low level. So the growth hormone, both at the level and the duration, will affect the height. Also, your muscle mass might come into play, your fat might come into play, because those things are going to affect your metabolism, which is going to deplete or not deplete the amount of nutrients that you get that affect the development of not only the mass of your bone, but also even the length of the bone. It's kind of strange how that might occur, but it can. Then you have metabolic rate. You may have other factors like, are you diabetic? What nutrients can you eat? So a lot of things come into play when it comes to your body weight or your height or your intelligence or whatever, your drive, your intensity level. Are you willing to go? Do you get many different problems or whatnot? Our eye color is not just a simple brown or blue. There's also hazel. There's also what's called green. There's also albino and other things, because there's not just a simple single gene that controls it. Yes, no, yes, no. Think about a circuit breaker in your house and a light bulb. How many ways can you turn on that bulb? Well, if it was monogenic, there would be only one way. It would be like connecting the wire and disconnecting the wire. That would be a monogenic. You connect the wire to the bulb and you disconnect the wire to the bulb. On or off, that's it. Polygenic is going to be more than that. You're going to have whether the bulb is good or the bulb is bad. Then you're going to have the light switch. Then you're going to have the circuit breaker to that room. Then you're going to have the main breaker that controls the whole circuit. Then you're going to have one on the power pole outside. Okay, so that's 5 different ways to turn off that light. What if you add a rheostat, which determines how bright that is? What if you change the color of the bulb? That could be another thing that could affect the color of the light. So now we see that the color of the light and the brightness of the light and the on-off of the light is now controlled by multiple factors. And this is basically what happens with most of the traits that we're interested in canines. It's not just as simple as people think. That's why dogs don't just come in yellow or black. Okay, there's a lot of different other colors because color is polygenic. All right, well, pursue perfection. Require that dog to have a good respiratory system, a good circulatory system, a good cardiovascular system, good blood vessels, good respiratory to dissipate heat, good nervous system, high levels of drive, good skeletal system where the bones are connected properly, the ligaments and the tendons are connected properly, the muscle tone is good, the coordination is good, the endocrine system, which is the hormones that affect the development of the body, is good. Many of these different factors will come into play, and if you slowly pick away and find the individuals, you don't want soft palates where a dog snorts because that dog's going to have to breathe with its mouth open. I want to see a dog that can breathe. People oftentimes say that dog's respiratory system is so good he can breathe underwater. Obviously, they don't mean the dog has gills. They're just basically saying that dog's respiratory system is so good that he can be in hold on a hog and still be able to maintain a high degree of work because he's able to efficiently move oxygen in and out of his lungs. And then from there, it can be picked up into the blood system, distributed into the muscles, utilized by the muscles for aerobic respiration, and the dog doesn't go into a lactic acid buildup from anaerobic, and then just be able to continue to recover on its feet after a high degree of intensity work for a long period of time. Because you have to have that dog that can perform at a high level of power, produce lactic acid, but then recover on its feet and get rid of that lactic acid out of that muscle. So recover aerobically. Recover from the anaerobic while still working aerobically, which is not easy to do, because a lot of times when you work anaerobic, you need to recover by sitting down or taking a break. But a high-class working animal that's on a hog in the woods has to be able to recover while it's still working. Y'all take care. These are just a few thoughts that I've had on my chest, and the point is, we need to be positive, we need to be professional, we need to be respectful, we need to stay away from the criminal minds that focus on the negativity. Let's raise the bar, let's pursue perfection, and we will obtain excellence. Y'all have a blessed day.